What internet marketing expert should you spend your valuable time listening to? Listen to someone who has over 20 years of web marketing experience and hundreds of website marketing success stories. That man is Aaron Sparks from Site Strategics. And this is Edge of the Web Radio.
Okay, we got an article from Web Designer Depot by Emma Grant. We came across this as a kind of a counter to a lot of the... we were not doing fear-mongering. That's not the point. We were talking about Google algorithm updates and the shakeout that's going to happen from search engine rankings on the mobile side of things. But we wanted to talk about just mobile design quickly in the last segment here. You know, responsive design is what mobile design is, and they're very helpful for developers because they allow us to serve content to the widest range of devices. Okay, think of the different devices as viewports. All right, so you've got your smartphone, your tablet, your desktop. All these devices are looking at a particular website in different ways, but they all have viewports into your site. So you need to maintain this without having different versions, right? And long past is the mobile version of a site that has different content and compacted in a particular way. You've got to have a responsive way to be able to communicate. And these methods are sometimes called scaling and fluid layouts, but we're going to talk about 3 mistakes designers encounter with responsive design. Check it out. So scaling versus fluid versus responsive. All right. There's a lot of confusion about these terms, and designers sometimes incorrectly use them interchangeably. In truth, each of these are distinct evolutionary steps in the layout technique. Scaling layouts, let's just talk about that for a second, are designed to scale every element relative to every other element. So the picture just gets bigger, okay, on a desktop, and it gets smaller on a mobile screen. Okay, they're all relative to each other, and that's where you get into the pinch and zoom problems, right? They are responsive in a sense. They will scale the content dynamically in response to the changes in the size of the viewport. The layout itself remains static, however, changing the size of every element to maintain consistent appearance. Okay, that's not the prettiest picture in a lot of ways. A fluid layout is actually different because they scale container elements relative to the size of that viewport. Okay, and you've seen this before. This is achieved by using what's called relative units, such as EMS, to overcome the problem of shrinking text. It adjusts based on that viewport perspective. All right, the design can be broken by the user scaling it individually. Okay, they can break elements and it can look funky whenever they start zooming in on stuff, but it's set to actually to render correctly. Now, a responsive layout doesn't scale anything. Instead, they change what is displayed depending on the size of the viewport. And in the responsive perspective, you can deactivate certain areas that you don't want to be seen on shown on a particular type of viewport. All right. And that's where you set up breakpoints, where you can actually have different elements disappear based on a particular threshold, like 900 pixels, right? Under 900 pixels, I don't want this thing to, that 900 pixels is, lo and behold, the viewport of a tablet, okay? Or down to 58 pixels or something like that for a smartphone. I'm shooting from my hip here. I haven't looked at that spec recently, so. But you can take out certain elements because you don't want the responsive design just to squeeze everything and drop everything down to a skyscraper of a website. You want to be able to remove things that aren't going to be particularly valuable for your client. All right, so disaster number 1, real quick. Wrapping menus. If you use a nav bar at the top of your page, a responsive design is supposed to snap it more into a more compact form, and then when the page is actually displayed on a smaller screen. But this does not always work perfectly if the display area is wider than the breakpoint. So if your actual navigation title is actually wider than the viewpoint of the smartphone, but too small to display on all the menus, it's going to wrap, and the text is going to look funky. It's just going to look like a nasty wrapping series of text, and it's not very usable for a mobile viewer. So there's several ways to solve this problem. First is to reduce the number of items displayed horizontally on the nav bar. So whenever it stacks, you don't have that much that actually has to be reordered. But you can also use drop-down items to display subcategories right? So to break up information in a little bit different way. The second way is to change the breakpoint to a lower value. The actual number to use is the width at which the nav bar starts to fail, okay? Another disaster real quick, using fixed width images on a responsive design. Quickly, if you are setting the size of the pixel size of an image, all right, you're going to have a responsive design that has a big old honking image that is defined emphatically that it's not going to adjust and not going to resize. Disaster number 3, element distortion. This is a bit more obscure, but it can actually elongate certain elements that you wanted to have smaller in the entire layout. It just starts looking really terrible. Now, these are all elements that you can control with your design. So if you have a mobile designer, you need to talk to them about these, and you need to test how your page is looking on all these devices. Well, thank you so much.